Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. I'm Antara and you're watching Point Break. Something quite unusual is happening. Employees from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google DeepMind are publicly asking governments to prepare to slow AI development, over 1,000 of them, in fact. Their concern is not an overnight intelligence explosion, it is a feedback loop. Better AI accelerates research, better research produces better AI, and repeat. At some point, progress moves faster than anyone can govern it. At the same time, a different coalition, NVIDIA and dozens of companies, is moving in the completely opposite direction, arguing that the answer is open defensive AI infrastructure and not slower development. And of course, then there is the Hugging Face incident. A frontier agent autonomously executed thousands of actions across cloud infrastructure over multiple days. Some closed models refused to help investigate it. An open weight model on sovereign infrastructure got the job done. 15 US state attorneys general are now asking OpenAI to preserve records, including records of agents that left notes for future versions of themselves with alleged instructions for circumventing internal constraints. So the question that we are asking today is, are we already inside the problem these researchers are warning about in the first place? That is a question we'll try to answer in this episode. I'm Antara, this is Point Break. Let's get right into it. Two guests with me today, two guests who are inside this from very, very different angles, very different vantage points. Abhishek Mishra is the founder of Deus Experiments, a researcher and technical writer working on state-of-the-art AI capability extraction from language models. He, in fact, his work on circuit tracing, capability compression, and agentic research workflows sits at the exact technical frontier that we are discussing today. Abhishek, it's really good to have you on Point Break. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
My second guest today is Sarthak Dubey, who is the co-founder and CEO of Mitigata, India's first full-stack cyber resilience platform, integrating security, risk, compliance, and cyber insurance, backed by Nexus Venture Partners, serving 500 plus enterprises across 25 countries. Sarthak, it's really, really good to have you here. Welcome to Point Break.
Thank you, Antara. Glad to be here.
It's a true pleasure, Abhishek and Sarthak. All right, I'm going to put something on the table right at the start. 1,000 AI researchers are essentially asking governments to prepare to slow the frontier, right? Meanwhile, NVIDIA, on the other hand, is building open defensive infrastructure, and an AI agent just spent days autonomously breaching systems while some closed models refuse to help investigate it. Would you say that we are already inside the problem that these researchers were warning about in the first place, or would you say this is just theoretical? Abhishek, if you want to take it first.
Yeah. So I would say in some way we are already inside the loop of recursive self-improvement. As you can say, we have already crossed the threshold of similarity, because now these models are capable of not just improving themselves via post-training, they're also able to write faster kernels to improve their own inference. They're able to edit their own harnesses to maximize their capability on any given tasks. So just with minimal guidance, or with, let's say, very, very basic human in the loop support right now, these models are capable of doing a lot. And if we allow them to fail or try for several days, then as we have seen in the OpenAI shared reports as well, that they were able to use lots of inference time compute to break out of their sandbox, as well as attack multiple parties, whether on modal or Hugging Face. Yeah.
All right, Abhishek. Thank you for that. Sarthak, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, so just echoing Abhishek's thoughts over there, that of course, yes, the models are improving and they have come to a point where they are self-improving. And not just that, another viewpoint of this is that, it is essentially a hacker or an employee who doesn't get tired, right? The point is that the level of experimentation that a human could do had its own limit. Whereas whatever is happening, whether it is OpenAI, whether it is the Claude, very recently they just found out another vulnerability which was exposed by one of the agents. The point is just that because there is a lot of experimentation that they can do without again having any kind of human in the loop, sort of changes the entire ecosystem and changes the entire equation. The question is not about whether they are able to learn themselves and get themselves better. That is something good for the AI ecosystem altogether as well, but it is more around how exactly you create those guardrails to make sure that those continuous experimentation and making sure that they breach the your systems that do not happen.
All right, all right. Thank you, Sarthak and Abhishek, for your perspective on that. Uh, the dramatic version of recursive self-improvement is an AI that rewrites its own code and instantly becomes super intelligent. Now, the more realistic and perhaps more concerning version is gradual. AI systems conducting experiments, writing training code, evaluating models, improving agent harnesses, and helping researchers really build stronger successors. Right? Each cycle slightly faster than the last one. Abhishek, you work on capability extraction from language models, on really understanding what's actually inside these systems and how to amplify it. From that technical vantage point, which parts of frontier model development can already be automated and what still requires human judgment?
So I'll take this thing as an example that right now, whether a model can improve in a particular area or not has all gotten down to this one thing. How well can we frame it as a kind of a problem where we can say that this is your goal, this is something that you have to hill climb, this is all the data that you will need to bother yourself with, and this is the sandbox where you'll be conducting your experiments. If we can provide these if we can provide this information to these models, then they are incredibly good at being able to hill climb or maximize their scores. The burden that sits on the researcher or the person who works with these models is how well can they design their harnesses, how well can they design their guardrails, because these models, while they will try to maximize their score, they do not really have any set narrow range of morals or ethics or any kind of standards which they always adhere to. So given any kind of hill climbing goal, they will follow any and every means necessary to achieve it. So the burden on us which really sits is that how well can we design these experiments, how well can we understand all the different ways these models actually attack the problem, and spend lots of time in defense of these things, so that we can also communicate these things. So let's say if we are trying to improve these models in kernel development, one of the core areas which I work in is essentially helping these models improve their own harnesses for any given kind of task, as well as writing their own faster inference.
Okay.
So in these areas, what I've seen is that while these models are capable of writing faster and faster kernels given a goal, they also reward hack a lot. So the burden which really falls on us researchers is being able to really probe and identify as many areas as we can, where all the possibilities of reward hacking or all the possibilities of these models breaching some sort of conduct are there. Yeah.
Okay. Abhishek, just building on that, would you say AI-assisted research could create a compounding improvement cycle? And also, at what point does that acceleration, become difficult to measure or control? Because I believe that's a specific thing that's making these researchers nervous, right? It's not a single breakthrough, but a self-sustaining loop. So where do you stand on that?
Yeah. So I'll say we have already crossed the point where, let's say, if a researcher is working on these problems, right? A researcher's own expertise is quite limited to only one set of areas. So let's say if I am in ML research, I may still be able to identify pockets where the model isn't really good, and then be able to beat it in some way, or be able to contribute to its improvement better than what it can itself. But there are so many other areas, let's say biological research or security research. So especially mathematics, where we are all questioning what are the what is the actual impact of the mathematical breakthroughs which have happened recently. So one of those areas is essentially how it aids the quantum computational fields. If we are able to make really good improvements in those areas, or if we are able to really find cheaper ways to break AES cryptographic security, then in those cases, our current systems which are already there, or anything which already exists, need to be revised. So, so one can really say that we are really close in terms of how something can just go wrong in terms of what these models are already capable of, and that's why frontier labs are also thinking multiple times before releasing, and then spending a lot of time in red teaming them. Yeah.
All right, Abhishek. Thank you for that. Uh, Sarthak, moving on to you from the security side. Mitigata is building cyber resilience for Indian enterprises. When you hear that AI systems are beginning to automate AI research itself, what does that mean for the threat landscape that we are trying to defend against?
No, absolutely. So from a defense standpoint and from an offense standpoint, of course, the research is happening and research works on both ends, right? One part is where you have a wrong intent or a bad intent that fast tracks the way how the attacks could happen and the way how vulnerabilities could be exploited, whether it is day zero or whether it is an existing vulnerability in any of the systems. So from an attack perspective, there is, of course, an AI research which is fast tracking and which is increasing the pace of the way how this is being done. At the same time, on the other side, the flip side, the defense side, there are the similar kind of measures which are being implemented across different systems, across the different systems, the way how even a security alert is being analyzed. The mean time to take to analyze and mean time to detect for SOC engineers has to reduce by a significant amount, and that is where there has to be some bit of balance between or symmetry between the AI-enabled attack at the same time AI-enabled defense. That is exactly where it is a game of cat and mouse that of course the security companies as well as the attackers, they keep on having amongst themselves. But in this particular situation, where when we talk about the governance standpoint as well, in this particular situation, the attacker, or the from an attack standpoint, there was no guardrails, but from a defense standpoint, there were guardrails. That's the reason why OpenAI or rather Hugging Face had to deploy open source models to cater to them. So it also boils down to, or it also raises a different question altogether with respect to the governance on what exactly are the guardrails we are setting up from a defense standpoint and from an offense standpoint, because whatever guardrails were set, defense did exactly the same thing, and OpenAI was not able to solve that. Where at the same time, from an offense perspective, that's exactly what it was supposed to do. It was not something which was a malicious intent that came into the picture from OpenAI to Hugging Face as well, and in Anthropic's case as well.
Would you say then, Sarthak, that the intent was the only thing that made it different from a conventional cyber attack? Because persistence and scale in attacks are not new, but something about this one does feel different. Like you very correctly pointed out, it wasn't out of a malicious intent that the attack happened.
Right, absolutely. And that is exactly the reason why, of course, the guardrails are being built around what exactly and how exactly these models should be used. But of course, the capability is not something that someone can govern or someone can protect, because it will keep on improving itself. So the mostly from a different standpoint, the major difference was also the fact that OpenAI and Hugging Face very publicly accepted that what exactly happened, because there are quite a lot of similar things that keeps on happening, and when it is not exactly the most marketable piece for any of the models, they don't really put it out there. So more from a marketing perspective, I'm talking more from a governance and more from how exactly it changes the direction and how it goes in security research. Of course, there are changes. Of course, there is difference on this particular kind of attack, but it will keep on happening until and unless, and it will keep on happening. I'm not saying that there's a way to stop this. The only way to make it better is what exactly are the guardrails, and if we can have some bit of balance between the AI capability on the defense side, as well the AI capability on the offense side.
All right, Sarthak. Thank you for that. Abhishek, the closed models, since we're on the topic, the closed models refuse to help with the forensic investigation. The open weight model was what actually worked. What does that, tell us about the limitations of safety refusals in closed systems? And also, is it a fundamental architectural problem, or would you call it a calibration problem?
Yeah, so essentially, right now, what these companies are trying to have as a kind of security measure, where
I
they
am
try
so
to.
sorry, Abhishek. I'll have to interrupt you there. I'm unable to hear your voice.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. If you could just repeat the answer
Okay.
once. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So right now, the way these companies are trying to avoid leaking these capabilities into the hands of malicious actors is by using classifiers. These classifiers are quite, let's say, extremely restrictive in how they completely ban one entire area of conversation. So if you want to discuss cybersecurity, then then any bits of it is, if it is present in your prompt, or if it is present in any kind of other scenario, then it's just going to identify that, okay, some mention of such and such topic is there, and then it's going to stop the discussion right there, which makes it really difficult for anyone else, like in this case Hugging Face, to be able to use the same models which attacked them, or at least the last generation models which are available in public, to defend themselves. And that's exactly what happened in this case. So thankfully, what they really had available was GLM 5.2 from ZAI, and and that helped them go and look at all the security logs and all the breach logs, and then understand what exactly happened, through which they were able to go and revise and then improve their own security further. But right now, this has also highlighted one of the biggest challenges which exists, that whether it's Anthropic or whether it's OpenAI, right now they do not have a proper means through which they can actually make the call that something should be allowed as a discussion. So let's say if a defender wants to use something to uh, to apply something for white hat means, then that is not allowed at all. And and I would say this is one of the biggest challenges that these companies have, which they really need to solve, because without them, we come down to the discussion of completely banning the availability of such models, or completely making the capability, or basically releasing models which are quite weak in the cybersecurity, or biology, or any other kind of areas where there are possibilities of something really bad happening in the hands of a malicious actor. Yeah.
All right, Abhishek. Sarthak, should every major organization maintain sovereign AI defensive capability? The ability to really run open models on their own infrastructure? Because I think from a practical standpoint, would you say that is realistic for Indian enterprises, especially right now?
At a standalone basis for enterprises, no, that is not exactly something I would say which is a realistic
Okay.
ask. But again, coming back, taking a step back and looking, you spoke about sovereign AI. Why it makes sense? Because at the end of the day, it is very similar to an arms race, right? US had control over OpenAI and Claude, and what exactly they should have, or what exactly they should be giving out to the world. The idea is, how better models we can make as well,
Okay.
that could bring on some bit of defensibility. And of course, there are some work which is being happening, Servam, with Servam and everybody working on it. But essentially, it all boils down to what exactly are the data points that we are working on as well. What exactly are the logs that Abhishek also mentioned, that, the amount of data that we already have in order to analyze. And even if we use open source model deployed in India and build on top of that, how better we can make, as security researchers and security engineers, and in general organizations, where we can build something which is in India, which of course can use open source models, but at the same time, there is a very limited dependency on, the American models that we are talking about. Because realistically, it is not possible at this point of time. I wouldn't say that it won't be possible a few years or few months from now. But this is something which is inevitable. We have to build the models of our own. And to be really honest, when you talk about frontier models and their capabilities, LLM and the models itself, it's not a moat for them. The moat is the compute. The moat is, how many data points do you have to actually manage and actually access, and how to improve those particular models. So as and when we start bringing in more and more data points that we already have, as we start bringing in capabilities of open source model and then improving them, we should be able to be in a place where we are able to counter some of these kind of offensives without having a dependency on an OpenAI or an Anthropic, because that definitely is not scalable.
All right, Sarthak. Abhishek and Sarthak, I'll sort of steer the conversation here a little bit. We may be entering an environment where autonomous agents operate on both sides simultaneously. Right? Attackers gain systems capable of testing thousands of attack paths in parallel. Defenders gain systems capable of detecting and investigating and remediating at, I would say, a comparable speed. Now, the question is whether these two sides are actually symmetric, or whether offense has a certain structural advantage to it. Sarthak, would you say that we are entering an agent versus agent security environment? And if yes, do human security teams remain decision makers, or do they become supervisors of systems they cannot fully follow in real time?
Yeah, I mean, in some way, partially, I would say that is the case. That has to be the case, wherein there is an agent versus agent kind of a situation where there is an agent on the offense side, an agent on the defense side as well. But while saying that, it all boils down to the intent of the next agent and how exactly we can build those guardrails around it. And when you talk about the defensibility of the systems and how exactly they are improving that. Their role would be defined, or would be confined to actually manage and understand and keep on improving on what exactly is happening. So the way how they keep on improving, they will be able to also tackle at the same tackle the agents on the attack side as well. At the same time, having human in the loop on the in case that the intent is not malicious and intent, because an agent would never have a malicious intent by its own. Right? Yeah. It will always keep on doing its particular job. Yeah. So that is the difference between an actual hacker doing it and the agents doing it. If there is a human in the loop on both the sides, then of course while there is always going to be some bit of mismatch in the dynamics, and there won't be an exact symmetry, but it's the same thing around how exactly a normal attacker versus defender in cybersecurity work as well. So how exactly, and like again repeating my point, that the defensibility will also come from how exactly we are governing, how exactly the policies are being governed, what exactly is the capability that we are defining for the defense agents, where which are countering the attack agents.
All right, Sarthak. Abhishek, do you think defensive AI could realistically keep pace with automated offense? Because there is an asymmetry argument that offense only needs to find one path while defense needs to block all of them. Would you say that AI could change that asymmetry, or do you think it would make it worse?
Yeah, so basically in the history of security, how it has typically happened is that this asymmetry has always existed. Because all the defenses that exist, for example, in the defenses that we have in our homes, as well as on our phones or any infrastructure that we use, right? So we already are using defenses which are basically the previous generation or the current generation about which all the information is already open to the attacker. So the attacker only needs to find some newer information to gain any kind of advantage. So such asymmetry has always existed, but how the field of security has tackled this is by following the principle that security does not come through obscurity. Security comes via openness. Security comes via being. So we have things like OWASP in cybersecurity, where let's say anything which comes out as a standard has to come out as a standard in the open, where all the white hat all the ethical hackers across the globe try to breach it in all the various ways, and each and everything is responsibly disclosed. So the thing is that we do not really sit and then wait that we would be lucky or unlucky to hit upon some sort of information where where some malicious actor may actually be capable of doing something. We instead achieve that state by keeping things open and then reaching a point of equilibrium where all the people who actually have the means to support it via the same principles that we have always been following in security, right? So by following the same kind of principles, by bug bounties and through these open mechanisms, we essentially get our systems really robust.
Okay.
We get them really robust to the point where it becomes computationally infeasible to find any new breach. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, just
All right.
adding on to that as well, because this
Sarthak?
is something which I
Yes,
sorry.
please do.
Just adding on to that and like echoing this point, I read this somewhere that the agents, make ordinary weaknesses more expensive, but essentially they are not, sort of, they don't make strong fundamentals itself irrelevant. Strong fundamentals are going to stay, but of course the ordinary mistakes are going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
Completely makes sense. Yeah. Sarthak, who do you think should authorize consequential defensive actions when response is happening at literally machine speed? Because that accountability question doesn't really have a clear-cut answer right now as we speak. And also it's going to matter when something goes wrong on the defensive side. So what do you have to say on that?
Yeah, so essentially, humans historically, in the case of cybersecurity, have been involved in monitoring on a much larger scale. It has to be more from a decision-making perspective, while if any kind of automatic action or any kind of action which does not really require a human to involve in that particular situation should be able to and that's the only way how you can tackle the machine speed versus machine speed, where you should, and it's also dependent on whether the decision what is supposed to be taken, whether it is a recursive, whether it is a reversive decision or not. If it is not a reversive decision, then you can have agents keep on if it is a reversive decision, then you can have agents keep on working on experimentation continuously as and when the machine speaks on the other end as well. But if it is not reversive, then you of course have to have human in the loop who are responsible for decision taking and taking the next steps around how exactly planning the next steps rather than simply monitoring and having the entire flow like how people used to do SOC monitoring before.
All right, Sarthak. Abhishek and Sarthak, let's also talk about the open secure AI alliance, because I think NVIDIA's position is more interesting than it first appears. NVIDIA and its partners are arguing that cybersecurity in the agentic era requires open weight models, harnesses and tools that defenders can inspect and customize and deploy independently. Now, the Hugging Face incident is, of course, their best argument, right? When closed models refused to help, an open model running on sovereign infrastructure got the job done. But openness at the same time also means the same models are available to attackers. Abhishek, does openness actually advantage defenders, attackers, or both equally? Because that's a question NVIDIA's coalition hasn't fully answered. What do you think?
Yeah, so right now I think this particular topic is something where any kind of standardization hasn't really taken place. So right now it's mostly a debate of whether the frontier capabilities should remain completely locked, as well as going to the extent of even nerfing them in a particular area like cybersecurity or any other areas where even a discussion with the user is not allowed. So right now, I would say that we are at incredibly beginning stages of this conversation, and no standardization has really taken place. When these discussions really start, the standardization would really have to tackle some questions around when you say that such models should be released, and if we really assume that these models are going to keep on improving in what they're capable of right now, they can definitely not be available for anyone to download just like without any sort of, let's say, they shouldn't be available to be downloaded anonymously. uh,
Okay.
they, like these kind of capabilities shouldn't really go into the hands of, let's say, terrorist organizations or any other kind of organizations
Hmm.
that definitely have lots of motivation to use it nefariously, right?
Okay.
So one thing really needs to be drawn as a line is that there needs to be some sort of a regulation in how uh, beyond a particular capability these models are made available,
Hmm.
but also it needs to be made in a way where it does not advantage one party or one state in some sort of asymmetric fashion. Let's say
Okay.
only very select countries have such capabilities where they are way superior in security, offense, or or any defense, whereas most of the other countries are mostly on the sitting side. And this also furthers the argument of sovereign intelligence, because the discussion here isn't simply about cooperation. The discussion here is also about the fact that the parties that are involved in it do not really have lots of motivation to trust each other, because
Fair.
whoever is ahead right now, they do not really want to lose all the
Fair.
advantage they've
Yeah.
had in terms of their researchers or
Hmm.
whatever they have unlocked. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Abhishek, would you say is the open versus closed debate focused on the wrong layer? Because you work on capability extraction and circuit tracing, right? You understand what's inside these models. Is it the model weights that matter, most for safety, or is it, the execution controls, the harness, the permissions, the identity layer around the model?
If we are trying to, let's say, create a kind of environment where a model is able to function without really without really breaking out of it, like some sort of really good sandbox zone, then in those cases, what is inside the weights as well as what is outside the weights, both are equally important.
Okay.
If one purely talks about capabilities in the sense that I only want to see how far this model can go, then in those cases the weights have to be there. But let's say if I really wanted to assume that the model that 2027, 2028, 2030, we have kind of models which are superior to humans in almost every way where we function in terms of intelligence and knowledge, then in those cases, what is around them is
Hmm.
going to be incredibly important as well.
Okay.
And lots of trial and error would need to go through, where we discover all the where we discover all the low hanging fruits that these models can exploit and then patch them in advance. Yeah.
Makes sense, Abhishek. Makes sense. Thank you for answering that with so much clarity. Uh, Sarthak, Mitigator integrates security, risk, compliance, and cyber insurance, right? You think about the whole stack. Would you say that an open weight model could actually be safer than a closed model when it's deployed inside a strongly controlled harness? And also, is India building that kind of controlled deployment infrastructure?
See, from a control perspective, let's be realistic here. You cannot gatekeep technology in a way how they would essentially are thinking of gatekeeping cybersecurity and blocking it. The models and blocking it specifically for cybersecurity related use cases. While of course, in theory, it might sort of sound logical, but it is not something which is going to be logical for us, because at the end of the day, like Abhishek was mentioning, that from a state perspective, from state to state, country to country perspective, there's always going to be a symmetry, and you don't want to be on the receiving end as well. So at any given point of time, you would want to have further advancements. Talking from where I sit, and I manage all of these, and our organization manages all of these risk parameters. For us, essentially, while saying that it is not a logical thing to, of course, gatekeep the entire thing, and once we build those particular guardrails, it's around how exactly you define your policies around countering, detecting, and managing any kind of breach, managing any kind of attack on the organization. And at the same time, it also boils down to what exactly is the telemetry that the researchers are already working on to make it much better. So from my side, I mean, like when, like, from opinion perspective, it is always going to be, a heads-on thing that you have to, keep on building in a much better way, because, you never know what's coming next to you.
All right, Sarthak. I also want to talk about the research acceleration paradox here, because AI systems are beginning to contribute to mathematics and cryptography and software engineering and scientific research, right? Anthropic reported that Claude Mythos discovered mathematical weaknesses in cryptographic algorithms that had survived, years of expert scrutiny. Now, the immediate findings did not compromise deployment systems, but they did demonstrate how rapidly AI-assisted research capabilities are advancing. And the paradox is this: these capabilities could produce enormous benefits, right? But they may also reduce the time available to evaluate each of these breakthroughs. Human validation may, in fact, become the primary bottleneck. Abhishek, my question is to you here. What really happens when AI generates research faster than humans verify it? Because that's not really a hypothetical situation. It's starting to happen right now in specific domains.
Yeah, so I'll say there would be lots and lots of scenarios where a model may be able to generate lots and lots hypotheses, be able to write code, which is faster than a human's capability to verify. But still, we would be bottlenecked not just by a human's review speed, but we would also be bottlenecked by the physical infrastructure that they. For example, if an AES, then they would really need to go and actually apply whatever they have done as a breakthrough, and then see whether the results actually match what has been the hypothesis for that experiment, right? And when it comes to things like biology or anything else which requires lots of physical infrastructure in terms of wet labs and other things, then I'll say it's not like we are always competing at the scale where some research is coming out, because mostly whatever research is coming out, it's going to only be a bunch of text by itself, right? So we are not afraid of text. We are essentially afraid of how something exists as a weaponized mechanism or something which can actually be used to do something. Yeah,
the probability of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sarthak, cryptographic weaknesses discovered by AI, that is a very specific and I believe a very serious threat. Should certain AI discovered findings be disclosed, differently when they have immediate security implications, like the vulnerability disclosed frameworks, but for the AI discovered weaknesses?
No, absolutely. I completely agree on that. I think so. There should be a different mechanism, and of course, even in terms of reporting, there has to be, especially when you're talking about something new, and when the research cannot stop, but the way how it is communicated, the way how it is, prograded can be stopped or like can be controlled or can be made in a much more defined manner, which follows a certain guidelines, which follows a certain sets. The way how OWASP did it as well for the normal vulnerability finding, and the way how the vulnerabilities were historically defined. How exactly do we define those, and how exactly do we tell this to the rest of the world? Of course, there has to be the right set of mechanism. I think so. Policymakers are working on that while we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Abhishek and Sarthak, let's also talk about pacing, because I believe that's the most controversial part of this conversation here. The signatories of the Pacing the Frontier statement are not calling for an immediate pause, right? They're asking governments to develop the ability to slow frontier-wide progress if automated AI research begins accelerating beyond existing oversight, right? It's a fire alarm, not a fire per se. Now, the practical questions are hard, however, because what would you actually slow? Is it models, compute, chips, training runs, agent capabilities? How would you coordinate intentionally without China? And wouldn't regulation simply protect today's leading laboratories? Sarthak, the question here is to you from a security practitioner's standpoint. Is spacing frontier AI realistic, or should the society focus entirely on accelerating defensive resilience rather than trying to slow the offense?
There is the pros and cons of both the situation, but at the same time, like I said, that pacing will not exactly work for us, because like I said, that it's an arms race, right? If we don't do it, somebody else would do it. At the same time, like I said, that the research and the capability building does not need to stop, but at the same time, how exactly we are implementing and how exactly this thing is being communicated can always be defined and discussed, because everything can eventually become a weapon for a state or for a country. At the same time, building those models and putting our foot on accelerator on building those defense mechanisms is something that, of course, as a government and as policymakers, we should be focusing on.
Certainly, Sarthak. And Abhishek, you work at the technical frontier. Is slowing down actually achievable? Can any country afford to slow down unilaterally, and would regulations simply protect the labs that are already ahead?
Yeah, so I do not believe that it's possible to
Okay.
basically get any of the frontier agents to agree to slow down what they're doing, because the problem right now is essentially of trust.
Yeah.
It's so while you would be able to get people to accede to the claim that yes, these capabilities can be harmful in the future, but you cannot get them to agree to the fact that if they do not themselves, like if they actually agree to not work on something, or if they agree to not explore a particular area which has already been unlocked, then they can expect all the other actors to abide by the same agreement. And that's one of the biggest problem. The biggest problem here is essentially of trust. So in such kind of scenarios where we know that no individual actor is going to accept being left behind, one of the biggest challenges really is in exactly how you're going to centralize as well as counterbalance each and every party that's going to be involved in it. So, and I believe that right now, lots of these capabilities may be privatized or be available completely with the with a few labs, but state is definitely going to be involved
Okay.
in how these things are regulated, because let's say if a particular country looks at all the different labs which are doing something, they do not really have they do not really have any mechanism to know exactly what's going on in the labs, right? Because unlike nuclear experiments or anything else, it's not like other countries can even monitor it via satellite or any other kind of imaging or scanning, right? So these capabilities can be furthered completely in isolation without having anybody alarmed about it, without having anybody informed about it. So the only way really, the only way that really makes sense here is to be able to explore it as much as possible with the right actors involved, and be able to discover and patch each and everything that we can at this level of capability. And what should really keep us reassured is that anything which is possible with current capabilities is something, let's say 98%, 99% being discovered, and the cost of any further discovery and or anything else which has been left unnoticed is so huge that it can be regulated properly, right? So only such kind of possibilities are entertainable. Otherwise, I really believe that while people can show their concern via certain kind of agreements that we should pace the frontier, or we should slow down capabilities, but but the ones who are actually ahead are not going to agree. Yeah.
All right, Abhishek. Thank you for that very candid answer. Let's close on the central tension here. Right, the two coalitions in today's debate may not be entirely opposed. One is asking governments to develop mechanisms to slow frontier progress. The other is building open infrastructure to make advanced AI safer and more defensible. Now, the real question is whether security can accelerate faster than capability here. Abhishek, what evidence would actually justify activating a global pacing mechanism? What would you need to, see to say the feedback loop has gone beyond meaningful human oversight?
There are lots of areas where I'll say the parties which are involved. For example, when Anthropic actually shared their blog where they were able to speed up brute forcing AES algorithm. It it was something impractical. Like they did not really brute force AES up to 10 rounds as how it is typically. They only did it for 7 rounds as a toy use case. But but even in that kind of scenarios, but even in that kind of scenario, they admit in their blog that they themselves that their researchers required several hours of study to be able to understand whether whatever has been achieved is meaningful or not, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that when we say human oversight, we always assume that the best of the best, or basically the 1 percentile experts, are available for us to identify and then aid us in these kind of scenarios. Whereas right now, most of what is happening in these labs, whether in terms of mathematics, whether in terms of security, or even in, let's say, biological let's say, like even in potential biological attacks where there are recipes to create certain kind of chemical compounds which should not be released in public, where somebody could be able to, where somebody can procure material available at nearest chemist shops or nearest factories, and then be able to create some sort of chemical compounds which can be used in a really bad manner, right? So so uh, so to be able to identify and take any action, right now these labs already are quite behind, because what they have are AI researchers. These AI researchers can look at some result, but they still themselves require lots of real experts supervision and intervention to be able to identify whether something bad has happened. So we are already dealing with that kind of problem. And what I really see happening is that lots and lots of uh, interdomain expertise is going to all coagulate around these frontier labs, because they're going to need each and every party that's involved in it to really tackle all the things
Makes
which are
sense.
possible. Yeah.
Makes sense, Abhishek. And Sarthak, the accountability question: who is legally responsible when an autonomous agent crosses a legal or operational boundary? Because existing computer misuse laws were written around human actors and human intent, like you very correctly pointed out. Now, a lab cannot really prosecute an AI system, but it may face negligence claims. Is the legal framework anywhere near ready for this? For something like this?
That's exactly, the major problem statement, more than the crisis that we're talking about is more like an insurability crisis, where who exactly is basically legally liable and who exactly, is actually insurable for this. So we do cyber insurance and professional indemnity and tech errors and innovations insurance. And it is a very constant topic of discussion whether this is a cyber liability or it is an omissions liability, where it is something that is coming in from systems error. But of course, while this being an insurability problem statement, the liability boils down, and this is the question, and this is the debate that boils down, that the traditional tech errors and omissions, the traditional professional indemnity, whether that will be, given to the AI agents as well, is something, of course, we, the insurers, at the same time, everybody else has been discussing. And it is an open question. And that is the actual crisis that we are looking at, wherein, you don't know whether the systems are insurable. You don't know whether the companies are insurable against cyber security and cyber attacks by AI agents.
All right. All right. Abhishek and Sarthak, in the interest of time, I will have to wrap the segment, but I do have one final question before I let you go. And it's the same one for the both of you. If AI begins improving AI, right, and every improvement makes the next one arrive faster, what should humanity really prioritize here? Because building open defenses capable of keeping pace with that acceleration, or preserving the ability to slow the frontier before the cycle moves beyond meaningful human oversight. Where do you stand on that?
My personal understanding is that in in any of the means that we can right now exert, um whoever is at the frontier, they need to they need to really work in close cooperation with both the experts as well as various other organizations, where it's quite clear that their vested interests are towards uh, identifying and patching all the different ways in which something can go wrong. And uh, and and that's something which may come at the cost of dilution of the lead that they have, but it is something which is going to be really necessary. uh, though I do not know how exactly would it be achieved, because as I mentioned earlier, that this is a problem of trust, and and those at the frontier willingly uh, losing out on certain capabilities. But the way I see things happening, I see it unfolding in quite a few interesting ways, because as we also saw that lots of employees at these frontier labs by themselves took the lead to first create that manifesto, and then also willingly sign it, where they said that they were concerned that these things can spiral out of control. So I personally believe that we need to convince those at the frontier with the argument that you would not be able to keep these capabilities completely closed, because lots of parties who are involved in the research itself uh, do not really feel strongly about keeping it entirely closed, and some of them may even break away and then create something completely different. So the secrets wouldn't really remain secrets, and there is a need for close cooperation to uh, to basically mitigate whatever is actually going to happen. Yeah.
Yes. Sarthak, you want to add?
Yeah, adding on to Abhishek's point, like Abhishek rightly mentioned, governance and mechanism to again communicate, again work on what exactly is being done and what the research is being done and what exactly is being used for. Governance is required, the way how these frontier models and frontier labs are working on.
Yes.
But while at the same time, we are sitting in in a situation where we know for a fact that it might go haywire, it might spiral out, and we have to build the defenses in the same way. And luckily for us, we have the similar kind of resources on the defense side as well. So we might have to sort of work probably 100x or 1000x harder, or our agents would have to work 100x or 1000x harder, and identify all of those use cases and create sort of a solution for multiple problems. And that is the reason why an approach where you have more telemetry, an approach where you have more data points to work on to improve your own models and improve your own AI capabilities on the defense side would make sense. While saying that, it is going to be a game of cat and mouse.
All right. All right. Abhishek and Sarthak, thank you. Thank you for your time. It's been a very educational conversation. And for everybody who has tuned in right now, viewers, the Hugging Face incident was not the end of something. It was more of a preview, I would say. An autonomous agent operated for days across complex infrastructure without human direction at each step. That is by itself very telling, right? Some of the closed systems designed to be safe refused to help investigate it. The open model on sovereign infrastructure got the job done. Now, that might not be a comfortable story for either of the open or closed camp, but it would suggest that the problem is harder and it is certainly more urgent than either coalition is fully acknowledging. So the recursive loop may already be running here. The question is whether we build the oversight before we cannot. So thank you for everybody who has tuned in. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Antara. This is Point Break. I'll see you again next episode.